What's going on with Make America Healthy Again? There's all sorts of talk. And again, our promise is that we want to bring it up and then talk to it, especially from a perspective as a dietitian. So we're focusing not on the Make America Healthy Again movement as an overarching. We're focused mostly on the nutrition. So update me.
Let's do it. So just to clarify, for those who don't know, Make America Healthy Again is a political movement. It is spearheaded by Robert F. Kennedy, who is currently our director for the Health and Human Services division. So a lot going on in the world of changing our health and wellness, regulations, recommendations across the country. So the biggest one that I think is worth talking about right now is what's called the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, specifically Subtitle A of that act, which is about nutrition. So this was just passed in the House not too long ago. It was passed by, I think, 1 or 2 votes. It was very close. And so now it is going over to the Senate for approval. And so there is a lot to this bill. I tried to read through as much of the actual bill as I possibly could, and it's very long. Specifically, even the nutrition section, there's almost too much to go through. So I'm going to highlight 2 of the, I think, most relevant changes that are proposed in this bill that would apply to us and that maybe we could throw our 2 cents in on.
Okay.
So again, there's so much to this bill, but one of the biggest changes that a lot of people are talking about are the reforms to SNAP. SNAP is the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. It is one of the biggest anti-poverty programs in the U.S., specifically dedicated to food insecurity. We care about that. We're dietitians. We want people to be eating and eating well. So again, 2 of the main significant reforms that I want to highlight is, one, the redefinition of eligible foods in SNAP. And so the bill will amend the definition of food that's allowed under SNAP eligibility. So there are already some exclusions on this list. So you cannot use SNAP benefits to purchase tobacco products or alcohol or foods that are hot at point of sale. So think like the hot foods bar. You can't buy live animals, and you can't buy non-food items like cleaning products at the grocery store. They are proposing adding some exclusions to this list. The biggest one that people are talking about is soda, but also things like candy, ice cream, prepared desserts. They will have 180 days after this bill is passed, the USDA, to determine which foods make that list based on their nutritive value and how closely they align with the dietary guidelines for Americans and those that do not. So it's going to be a huge undertaking for the USDA. Good luck to them, but that is one of the big proposed changes. And then the second is state cost sharing. And so, again, this is one that I feel like is really hot in the media too because of all the potential downstream effects of this. But states will be asked to take on 5% of the SNAP benefit costs and 75% of the administrative costs. And according to the Congressional Budget Office, this will be a cost savings of $267 billion over 10 years. So those are the 2 big updates.
2 big
so
ones.
State cost sharing. States sharing more of the cost of SNAP, and then also a redefinition of those eligible foods.
Yeah. Last time for our MAHA, one of the things I invited people to do was to get clear on their stance, why they feel that way and where it's coming from, and then be productively vocal.
Yeah.
Now is the time. Now is the time to be productively vocal. These are proposals, and proposals are negotiations, and negotiations come from conversations that are based in surrounding the issue, highlighting potential positives and then also potential consequences, and trying to maximize the good and minimize the bad. And so you and I talked about the idea of, I have what I think is a brilliant idea that helps 50% of people. You have an opposing view that helps 50% of people. How can we work together to help 80% and then make sure the 20% are not screwed? The state-based funding thing is a very good example of earlier when I talked about the farming models. It would be super cool if we could just snap our fingers and organic farms could be our entire farming model, and we'd have all the animals living freely on the farm, and we would take back 70% of our farmland and away from corn and soybeans and reinvest it into grass and trees and all of that. Millions of people would die if we did that.
Yeah.
That's the harsh truth. It can only be done as a baton pass.
Yeah.
One farm at a time, becoming organic.
Yeah.
And slowly but surely, the percent organic farming increasing over the course of probably decades.
Mhm.
We're already 20 years into that movement. There was a Netflix documentary way back before Netflix was even on a computer that was about farming. And that was, so this movement's been a long time coming. I would say the same thing about this state-sponsored conversation. There is a time for sledgehammers and there's a time for scalpels. We are very nearing the time for scalpels.
Yeah.
And if
So
this
especially
is
when it comes to food insecurity.
correct, if we just go in, the discussion may be busting things up to drive conversation, but if they don't get surgical, this is going to hurt a lot of people.
Yeah.
Cutting these things without, it's funny, subtracting without addition. So quitting smoking without adding positive health habits. That's, if you have people that are reliant on these things, kicking them off of it without alternative is objectively a bad idea. We have to figure out a way to land this plane that minimizes the damage done. And so when you talk about reallocating budgets, and I understand, reducing spending, especially with debt, and we're not going to go down the political rabbit holes that are this conversation, or we'll be here for hours and still not be any farther. But it's to say that if we're going to reallocate funding and then we're going to prioritize certain funding, we have to look at, okay, what are we cutting? What is that currently doing? And the people that are in those trenches and know what it's currently doing need to be very productively vocal and try and bring that to the conversation so that we can make sure we're helping as many people as possible and hurting as few people as possible. I would love to see funding going towards prioritizing quality foods. So going back to, are we taking away sugary foods, or are we improving the access to fruits and vegetables and cooking lessons and education on foods and access to quality and nutritive foods? So it's like, are we removing the thing that people are reliant on and then leaving them to not have alternatives? Or are we improving access to the things that we'd rather? So that's that subtraction by addition again.
Yeah,
are we just
absolutely.
subtracting, or are we adding? And if we're going to cut a budget, we need to be very, very careful. So this is the time to be productively vocal.
Yeah.
I think that this is proposed, right? A proposed bill drives conversations about ways money is going to flow.
Yep.
And so the people that live in these areas, that are knowledgeable of these areas, that have experience in these areas, let's have conversations, recognizing that the reality is this is a conversation whether you want to have it or not.
Yep.
So you can either not come to the negotiation table and pretend like that's going to do good, or you can accept that we're currently in a place where this is happening. Some version of this is going to happen. It's a game of tug of war that I wish we could do more amicably and create an outcome that was really genuine. Unfortunately, the tug of war gets very competitive and, very tribal, but the game of tug of war is happening. And so now is a time to check your biases, check your understanding, check your awareness, and let's have really productive conversations because this is something that could go well, but also could go very wrong. And people that are afraid, it's because of the uncertainty where we don't really know the good and how we're trending that way, but we are pretty aware of what could go wrong. Yeah. And so that only gets better if we lay it all out, map it out, and then create a path forward.
Yeah, absolutely.
As a people.
And us as dietitians, we are going to be the boots on the ground people who are going to be dealing with the ramifications of this and how it actually impacts people. So we'll keep being vocal about what we've been seeing and how it's been impacting people. But
our experience in WIC, I was going to say,
I'll say that I personally was a beneficiary of SNAP and WIC. Lots of my immediate family and close family were all and have been all SNAP beneficiaries and WIC beneficiaries. And so, I don't know. So I have that unique perspective, which makes me biased in some ways, but I think also offers a unique perspective, especially now that I am a dietitian and we still work with low income individuals and see how this impacts people. So I have some thoughts.
I was going to say, do you want to share them?
Yeah.
Let's dig in.
So let me talk first about the redefining of what counts as food under SNAP eligibility. So my approach to this would be the same way I would approach an individual. I would not be telling them food's good, bad. I would say, obviously, tobacco, alcohol, there's not a lot of nutritive value there. So that's an easy, we're going to try to keep that as little to zero as possible. So I think that makes sense that it's not covered as a SNAP benefit, right? But things that do offer nutritive value, even if it's mainly just calories, I think that there is still some merit to that. And I think about, again, trying to avoid this all or nothing, good or bad scenario. Maybe what we could do instead, this would be my proposed amendment to this bill if I was
let's hear you out.
in the Senate right now trying to get this bill passed. I would say that maybe instead of restricting a bunch of these foods like candy and soda, et cetera, potentially we could instead create a structure in which maybe that SNAP dollar goes further if we're using it on produce or whole grains.
So
or
incentivize quality foods.
Exactly. And I think we have a really good example of this here in Pittsburgh. Gateway Engineering, who you did an interview with their CEO, he actually did this in his workplace where he offered food subsidies for the more nutritious foods and then just didn't offer a subsidy. I'm sorry, she didn't offer like a discount for those less nutritious foods. So again, that would be how I would approach it, is maybe still allowing people to purchase whatever, foods they wanted with SNAP eligibility, even if it wasn't the most nutritionally dense, but nudging them in the direction and, allowing for there to be somewhat of a reward for their SNAP dollar to go further if they are choosing more nutritious foods. So that's my proposed solution to this. And I think that emphasizes more of an additive focus rather than a restrictive one. So we're emphasizing the things that we could be adding in. But I think about my pregnant mom or my cancer patient who is really struggling with nausea, and tasty cakes are the one thing that they can tolerate right now. I don't want them to no longer have access to that because of SNAP eligibility changes. I also think about my parent with a child who has special needs, who really only likes, their Cheez-It crackers, and that's like their, it's not ideal, but maybe right now that is like their main source of nutrition, and that's like what they can get them to do. And with my clients, I kind of establish like levels to things. We have level 1, which is you need calories and fluids, right? So that's like my clients who are food insecure, my clients who are maybe like pregnant or struggling with nausea or cancer, things like that. So I always just emphasize to them, like, I want you fed and hydrated. And then if we can expand on that, if we can level up from there, let's talk about balancing our meals. So having protein, carbs, fats, and produce at our meals as often as possible. And then level 3 would be let's choose higher quality sources of those things. So that's how I would approach this from a public health standpoint as well. Is like, let's maybe nudge people more in the direction as opposed to saying these foods are not allowed. I think that just provides even more stigma and more red tape, people being able to access food when they're already struggling.
I appreciate that perspective.
What do you think?
One of the things that comes to mind is policy is rarely as nimble as we need it to be.
Yep.
And this is an example of they're drawing a line somewhere.
Yeah.
And what you've said and what I've heard is, hey, maybe we don't draw the line as harshly and maybe we create a spectrum.
Yep.
We create a gray area.
And if we're already having to go through the entire list of foods, and it's realistic, it's not the legislators doing that, it's the USDA doing that, and they have a whole team. Is it that much more complicated to add this layer of complexity? We're already adding a lot of other layers of complexity elsewhere.
So I would agree. The question that I would nudge back on, because I think that I agree with a lot of what you said, and there's some subtle differences in my vision of it. I totally agree that we should be incentivizing quality foods by saying, hey, your SNAP funding goes further with certain things. So we're going to give you more of these things for less, and then but these are still on the table kind of scenario. One, when I hear that, there better be dietitians in this conversation.
1000%.
And they better be dietitians that have been career community dietitians, that understand the community, that understand the people that actually use the benefit, so that we can really, because it goes back to, it becomes this really simple idea of, oh, the food bank has a bunch of fruits and vegetables. And it's like, great, but they don't know how to cook the vegetables, and you're assuming they have a kitchen. Yeah. And so there's again, Dunning-Kruger, there is an ignorance to the people that tend to make the policies, that they're affecting change in people that they don't even understand. And so I think that first thing I'd say is we better make sure the people that are in this conversation have robust understanding of the communities that are being affected. Where I would push back is in creating this spectrum. I still think there's a place that you draw the line and say it's not funded, because the assumption
and
I'll say this is an assumption that recently changed. My thinking about this recently changed. So I'm going to challenge you on this a little bit. Are we saying they can't have candy? So like right now we don't let them buy alcohol and tobacco. Are we saying that no one on SNAP education smokes and drinks?
No, we're not
They're
saying that.
using their own money for discretionary, disposable, personal preferences. So if we're saying that their SNAP education is to their nutritional benefit, at what point is there an opportunity to draw a line and say, you can eat candy, go nuts with your Snickers bar, but government and taxpayer dollars are not going to fund your Snickers. And I'll comment, and this is a fun conversation to have, because these are the conversations that need to take place. You and I don't even need to walk away today with a hard and fast policy, but these are examples of things that we need to be thinking about. Is we have the origin of SNAP education was rooted in food insecurity and inadequate nutrition and nutritional deficiencies. In 2025, most nutritional deficiencies are not caloric.
It's micronutrient.
They're micronutrient, right?
Mm-hmm.
Most people's the percent of people that have caloric inefficiency versus people that have caloric abundance is orders of magnitude different. If we look at the lowest income populations that are relying on SNAP, do they have lower rates of obesity and higher rates of osteoporosis and osteopenia? No.
Mm-hmm.
So we're saying that they're not struggling necessarily with calories. And so when we sit there and say we're taking calories from them, the people that are on board for that would argue that that's kind of the point, is we need to be drawing a line and saying, hey, if you want to enjoy these foods, great, go nuts.
Mm-hmm.
But that is not the point of this nutrition program. It used to be in the past when calories were not adequate, the goal was to get people enough calories. But now the goal is to get people the right calories.
Mm-hmm.
And if that's done appropriately, that could arguably be an evolution of a good thing becoming a great thing.
Yeah.
I would love to see SNAP Ed, which had genuine origins from day one to try and get people enough nourishment, to us saying, hey, we're a world leader in medicine and in health, and we're at a place where we don't have a calorie problem, we have a quality problem.
Mm-hmm.
So let's now make SNAP a higher quality thing. Now, this comes back to what you just said. If we're going to do what I just said, that doesn't come from just saying candy is now smoking.
Mm-hmm.
That is potentially a part of this conversation, but it would also come from empowering quality through improving, if you're buying protein and produce, you are getting 5X or it is 50% off, right?
Yep.
So I agree with you wholeheartedly that there would be more value in us properly incentivizing
mm-hmm.
the good stuff to encourage and improve access to it if our initiative is genuinely to feed people and feed them well.
Mm-hmm.
Step one was feed people. Well, we're now in a reality where we feed people, but we don't feed them well.
Mm-hmm.
So now if I would love to see tax dollars go towards feeding people well, and I agree with you that the better priority would be what are we empowering them to eat instead of disempowering.
Mm-hmm.
But I do not agree that we shouldn't also draw a line. I just don't think that should be the number one part of the policy. Yeah. I do think that we could treat certain foods like alcohol and tobacco, not to demonize them and make people afraid of them, but just to objectively say that is not in your nutritional interest. That is a food you're eating for fun. If I eat a Snickers, it's not because I need nutrition. It's because I'm enjoying a treat. So use your own hard-earned money to get a treat, and then let's use this money to nourish you.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there is some intention in that, but how you say that, how you land that, and how you execute that is massively important, because if you're not careful, if all you do is draw a line in the sand and ban certain things, and you've done nothing to empower people to get access, you haven't actually done what I'm talking about, which is level up nutrition access to quality nutrition access. To take us to the next level, you have to do the additions like you're talking about.
1000%. I think that leads us well into that next point, which I would sort of like to, I think should be our last point, because we got to get going.
We got to wrap up. All good.
Is the state changes. So again, this is my pushback on some of these state changes of the state cost sharing. So again, just to reiterate, SNAP is going to, they're proposing that SNAP, 5% of the actual benefits be the responsibility of the state, and then 75% of the administrative costs. What are one of the biggest administrative costs to SNAP is SNAP Ed. So SNAP Education. So this is the nutrition education branch of this supplemental nutrition program. And if we are going to be empowering people, I think education is a huge part of that. That's why we are here. That's why we have this podcast. That's why we became dietitians in a large way. And I think a lot of the big criticism is, especially these underfunded states that are now going to be responsible for shouldering the cost of 75% of the administrative costs, are going to inevitably have slashes to SNAP Ed. And that's why a lot of dietitians have since mobilized and gotten very vocal about the importance of SNAP Ed. Partly because I would say a lot of dietitians are employed by SNAP Ed.
Yep, there's a bias there.
I even did an internship
There's
with SNAP Ed.
There's also genuine need
and genuine
it's both.
concern.
It's allowed to be both.
Yep. And so that would be my other thought is if the intention is to make America healthier, why are we potentially jeopardizing these educational programs that are designed to not just feed people well, but ideally also educate them on how to do so.
Yeah.
And I understand that they're not saying, we're going to totally get rid of this. They're just saying the states are going to be responsible for it. But again, if we're thinking about the downstream consequences, my question is what is the true intention of some type of reform like this, and just to kind of go back to my stat before that was from the Congressional Budget Office, there's going to be a $267 billion saving over 10 years. I actually watched an interview with the Secretary of the USDA, or I'm sorry, the Secretary of Agriculture from the USDA, Brooke Rollins. And the first thing she mentioned was how costly SNAP is. And it totally is. But maybe we just call it what it is a cost savings rather than an effort to make Americans healthier. Yeah. I have no doubt that some of these do have genuine intentions of making people healthier. But again, these state, cost sharing, I think that is mainly a goal to reduce government spending, which, to be fair, is what, Republican politicians tend to do, is decreasing government spending. But again, let's call it what it is. Let's not call it making an effort to make Americans healthier. That's my pushback.
Okay. And what I'd like to do is what we can hear is how this trickles up, which is to say that we are currently in a Republican-based period of time. And I don't want to make our discussion about the upstream politics, though it's inevitable that it's a part of the conversation. What I'd love to do is zoom out, then zoom in, which is to say that is the current reality that, like you said, upstream, the current priorities are to consolidate, right? You have a party that believes smaller government allows the private sector to take over, and you have a party that believes that bigger government allows for more consistency and raises the floor for all. And our podcast is not about that debate. And I mean, that's a fascinating debate, and but it's not really the scope of this. So what I want to then do is say, okay, we are currently in a reality where smaller government is the initiative. And so right out of the gates, a lot of people are going to be, this is a non-starter. They disagree because they disagree with the precedent that smaller government's the answer. Yeah,
which we're not having that conversation.
We're not having that conversation either, right? See how I'm zooming in, right? We're not having the conversation of which side is right, or then from there, no, that's not where this is going. But we zoom in and we go, okay, we're in a place where in the next few years, we are going to realize smaller budgets. That means that an idealized to-do list of 100 great endeavors, right? Because the government funds great things. We are now saying that all of those endeavors have to take a 30% haircut, just as an example, just a number. So do all of them take a 30% haircut, or do we get rid of 30% of them, or do we get rid of 15% and then contract the rest to 15%? How does the budget happen? Being vocal is what allows you to compete for the resources that are at your disposal.
Absolutely.
And so that, if we're going to zoom in, if SNAP Ed is really that valuable and that important, then we need to prove that and show that and show the outcomes. Because one of the bigger problems when I shouldn't say bigger problems, one of the bigger conversation points has been a lot of these departments have gotten bigger and bigger and bigger, and their outcomes have gotten worse and worse and worse. So there's an objective question, which is, are they actually working? And when we talk about the administrative size, if a certain percentage of the money being spent is administrative and the bigger administration has created lower outcomes, the question is, why do we have that administration? If I hired 30 people and started losing $100,000 a year, I didn't utilize those people well. So you can either go in and try and help those people realize their benefit and then create a positive trajectory, or you fire those people. Once again, that is a higher level political decision that is kind of out of the scope of what we're talking about. But if we're going to accept the reality that we are in budget cut season, as an entrepreneur I can speak to, and as a dietitian I can speak to, we need to be looking at, with the budget we have, what is the best use of the money available? And there are obvious benefits to SNAP. There are immense benefits, most of it being the actual delivery of real dollars to people so they can buy food. So if we can become more administratively efficient, and we can then use more of the money to prioritize budgets, and then those budgets can go towards the right foods, noting that right now our current scenario doesn't reduce diabetes and doesn't extend lifespan. It's not doing the things we want it to do. So something needs to change. Yeah, right?
I would agree with that.
And my comment would be, dietitians that are far better educated and professionals that are far better educated on this segment and industry than I'm speaking as an entrepreneur and a dietitian in a very different realm and reality, should be putting together creative budget proposals of, hey, we could become more efficient here. which would allow us to leverage more dollars towards the actual people to better support the people, which means the money is going in the hands of the people. And then what can we be doing to educate those people? And what can we be doing to get them and empower their access? Going back to your idea of, hey, let's disproportionately incentivize them to buy certain foods that are agreed upon across a panel of experts, as an example. And so I think that's where I'd be honing in is, like you said, yeah, there's a lot of uncertainty. And so the best way to deal with that, in my opinion, is to build plans to try and nudge the uncertainty towards a better outcome. And so squeaky wheels need to be squeaking was a viral clip from last episode. And I would say out loud again, this is where the people that are very knowledgeable of this should be taking that knowledge and helping us better understand the legitimate value of SNAP, not just from it's the right thing to do.
And it's a nice idea.
Yes, because it is, unequivocally.
Yeah, and it is so much more than that.
So is everything else that's going to get cut,
that.
right? If you're going to cut 30% of good things, that means 30% of good things go away. And I'm not here to have the conversation about whether or not we should be cutting it. I'm here to say it's happening. So what can we do to make sure these things are prioritized? And then also, can we look in the mirror and say, hey, over the last 30 years, has the expansion of this, what has it actually done? And is there a way to do it more efficiently? And is there a way to do it more like for better outcomes? And I'm not the person, my gut instinct would say there's definitely a way to do it more efficiently. There's definitely a way to do it more effectively. And there's probably a better way to do it for less money. I'm not the person to build that proposal, but I would assume that there are very, very well-educated people that have spent their careers in this space that have seen the inefficiencies of their reality and have seen the effectiveness of their reality and can speak to the more of this, less of this. Let's build a budget. Let's do more with less. Let's get creative and let's put ourselves out there and vie, because we don't want to be one of the 30 that get axed. And so this is a chance for all those great initiatives to put themselves out there, be great, and then also hopefully drive even better outcomes, especially if the current outcomes aren't, there's some good things coming, but they're not as great as they could be. And that, like I said, none of that comes from necessarily an agreement with the political hierarchy. It's very much dealing with our current reality. And as an entrepreneur who's had to deal with the ebbs and flows of business and hiring and pandemics and all sorts of things, like, pivoting to create better outcomes is an inevitability. And right now, while things are shifting, you can either be a victim or you can be a hero in this. And for those of you that are very knowledgeable and the right voices for this, please, please, please be bringing those assets to the table. We need you now more than ever.
Absolutely. Great.
Fun.
Good little debate. And yeah.
It's fun little pushback. I love conversations like this. I love the dialogue. I hope that it gets people thinking. The whole point is to collect perspectives, use your round table to come to great conclusions, and hopefully drive forward better outcomes from a place of insight, not from a place of personal bias.
Yeah. It's hard to root out that personal bias.
Oh yeah, none of us are perfect at it, but we do it better together if we let our